Los Angeles, December 31st, 2018. It was almost noon, and the sidewalks of Sunset Boulevard were overflowing with the frenzy of New Year's Eve. Store windows sparkled with lights, cheerful songs poured from speakers, and people rushed by carrying gift packages in their arms. But for the 70-year-old man walking through that crowd in a black hoodie and old jeans, this day was no different from any other. If anything, it was worse, because Ozzy Osbourne hated New Year's, and nobody knew that the man who had left his house for an ordinary walk that day would change a homeless young man's life forever within just a few hours. Ozzy's dislike of New Year's celebrations was something he had openly admitted even in media interviews. He had felt suffocated at home. "I need some air," he had told Sharon. "I'm going for a walk." Sharon wasn't surprised. She had known her husband for 36 years. "All right, sweetheart, but don't go too far and take your phone with you," she had said. When Ozzy stepped outside, he took a deep breath. He started walking from their Beverly Hills mansion toward Sunset Boulevard. The same thoughts gnawed at him at the end of every year. What did I do this past year? How many people did I lose? How much time do I have left? These thoughts disturbed him, but they also kept him moving. Staying still meant letting the thoughts swallow you whole. Walking was escape. As he walked down Sunset Boulevard, Ozzy observed the scenes around him. Luxury cars, expensive shops, well-dressed people. This part of Los Angeles reeked of wealth, but in the side streets of that same road, there was a completely different world. The homeless, the addicts, the people society had forgotten. Ozzy had always found this contrast unsettling. He himself had once been someone with nothing. He had grown up in one of Birmingham's poorest neighborhoods, in a family of 6, in a 2-room house. He had been forced to start working in a factory at 15. Now he had millions of dollars, but he had never forgotten those days. He couldn't. As it approached 12:30, Ozzy found himself in front of Guitar Center. This massive music store on Sunset Boulevard was one of rock history's legendary stops. Countless legends had walked through its doors. Its windows were always filled with the latest model guitars, amps, and drums. But today, the window was decorated with New Year's ornaments. Red and green lights danced around the guitars, artificial snowflakes were stuck to the glass, and in the center, on a special stand, sat a black Gibson Les Paul Custom. The price tag read $2,999. As Ozzy looked at the window, a figure caught his attention. Right in front of the glass, on the sidewalk, stood a young man, 19, maybe 20 years old. He wore dirty, torn jeans, a worn-out band t-shirt, and a jacket full of holes. The soles of his sneakers were almost completely worn through. His hair was long and messy, he had a few days' stubble on his face, and the dark circles under his eyes gave away where he slept at night. He was homeless. That much was clear from his gaze, his posture, his clothes. But there was something else in his eyes. As he looked at the guitar in the window, there was a light flickering in those eyes. Desire, passion, dreams. As the young man stared at the guitar, his hands moved slightly, as if he were holding an imaginary guitar, running his fingers over imaginary strings. His left hand was positioned at the headstock, his right hand curled as if holding a pick. Ozzy recognized that movement. It was a guitarist's reflex. This young man wasn't just some random homeless person staring at a window. This young man was a musician, or wanted to be one. Ozzy took a few steps closer. He stood quietly behind the young man and watched him for a while. The young man was unaware of Ozzy's presence. All his attention was focused on the guitar in the window. His lips were moving slightly, as if he were humming a song. Ozzy listened closely, and what he heard surprised him. The young man was humming the riff to Iron Man, Black Sabbath's song from 1970. Ozzy's own song. Was this a coincidence, or the universe's strange idea of a joke? Ozzy smiled slightly. "Bloody hell," he muttered to himself. "This kid is singing my song." Ozzy coughed to make his presence known. The young man flinched and turned around. His eyes widened with fear, as if he had been caught committing a crime. "I'm sorry, sir," he said quickly. "I'm leaving anyway. I wasn't going to take anything. I was just looking." His voice was defensive. the voice of someone who had spent years being chased away, looked down upon, ignored. Ozzy raised his hand in a calming gesture. "Relax, kid," he said. "I'm not chasing you off. I was just curious. Were you looking at the guitar in the window?" The young man looked at Ozzy with suspicion. He was trying to figure out what this old man wanted. Being homeless in Los Angeles had taught him not to trust people. Some would pretend to help and then rob you, some would mock you just for entertainment, and others would call the cops. But there was no threat in this man's eyes, just curiosity, and maybe a hint of understanding. "Yes," the young man said slowly. "The Black Gibson, Les Paul Custom. Been in production since 1968. Tony Iommi's signature guitar. Randy Rhoads used to play one too." Ozzy's heart stopped for a moment. Randy Rhoads. That name, even 26 years later, touched a deep wound inside Ozzy. Randy had been the first guitarist in Ozzy's solo career. A genius, an angel, and in 1982, at just 25 years old, he had lost his life in a tragic plane crash. Ozzy had never fully recovered from that loss. Every year on the anniversary of Randy's death, he would withdraw into himself, look at old photographs, listen to the albums they had recorded together. Now this homeless young man, a complete stranger, had mentioned Randy's name, and to Ozzy it felt like a sign. "So you know Randy," Ozzy said, his voice trembling slightly. The young man nodded. "Of course I know him. He was one of the greatest guitarists ever. The solo in Crazy Train, the neoclassical work in Mr. Crowley. The man was a genius. I wish I could have seen him before he died." Ozzy listened in silence. This young man didn't just know names. He understood music. He knew technical details. This wasn't some ordinary rock fan. This was someone who was genuinely interested in music, who had studied it, researched it. "So do you play?" Ozzy asked. "Guitar." The young man's face darkened. "I used to," he said quietly. "My dad had an old guitar. He taught me. But then, everything changed." He stopped, as if he didn't want to continue. Ozzy knew how to wait. He didn't push. He just stood there, with an expression that showed he was ready to listen. The young man took a deep breath. "My mum died 3 years ago," he finally said. "Cancer. My dad fell apart after she was gone. He started drinking. Then he kicked me out. I was 16. I've been on the streets ever since." Ozzy's face didn't change, but something broke inside him. 16 years old, thrown out onto the street, homeless for 3 years. This young man was almost the same age as Ozzy's grandchildren. While his grandchildren lived in warm homes with full refrigerators and loving families, this kid was trying to survive on the streets. "What's your name, son?" Ozzy asked softly. The young man hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Marcus. Marcus Reed." Ozzy extended his hand. "My name's John," he said, "but everyone calls me Ozzy." Marcus's eyes widened for a moment. Then they narrowed with suspicion. "Ozzy, wait a minute." He looked more carefully at the old man. Long black hair, round glasses, familiar features. "No, it can't be," he said, his breath catching. Are you Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, the Ozzy from Black Sabbath?" Ozzy shrugged with that familiar, easy manner of his. "Well, some people say that. I'm just an old man from Birmingham, and right now I'm talking to a young man who was humming Iron Man. It's a strange world, isn't it?" Marcus's knees trembled. For a moment it seemed like he might collapse. This couldn't be real. Meeting his idol on New Year's Eve, on Sunset Boulevard, in front of Guitar Center. It was like a scene from a movie, but it was real. Standing before him was one of rock history's greatest legends, and he was talking to him, as if they were just two ordinary people. Ozzy watched the young man's shock and smiled slightly. "Relax, kid," he said. "I'm just like you. I was just a bit luckier. And right now I want to have a coffee with you. I want you to tell me your story, because I have a feeling. And that feeling is telling me that meeting you today is no coincidence." Marcus didn't know what to say. His lips trembled, his eyes welled up. In the last 3 years, nobody, absolutely nobody, had wanted to have coffee with him. Nobody had wanted to hear his story. Nobody had treated him like a human being. And now, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, was offering him a coffee. This moment was the turning point of Marcus's life, but neither of them knew yet that the next few hours would be far more than just having coffee together. The small coffee shop on the corner of Sunset Boulevard was relatively quiet despite the New Year's Eve rush. Ozzy directed Marcus to a table in the corner and ordered 2 coffees. The barista must have recognized Ozzy because her eyes widened for a moment, but she professionally said nothing. Ozzy was used to this reaction. With a reflex built over years, he nodded slightly and sat down at the table. Marcus sat across from him, hands clasped together on the table, sitting like a child who didn't know what to do. He still half believed this was a dream. Ozzy took a sip of coffee and looked at the young man. "All right, Marcus," he said quietly. "Now tell me everything, from the beginning to the end. No need to rush. I'm listening." These simple words broke something inside Marcus. For the last 3 years, nobody had cared about his existence. When he walked down the streets, people would avert their eyes, as if by not looking at him, he would cease to exist. But now a legend sat across from him, giving him his full attention. Marcus took a deep breath and began to speak. "My mum was a music teacher," he said. "She played piano. Our house was always filled with music. My dad was an amateur guitarist. He'd played in a rock band when he was young, then gave it up. But he never let go of the guitar. He taught me my first chords when I was 7. By 12, I was playing Metallica songs. At 14, my dad and I would jam together in the garage." He paused, his eyes drifting somewhere far away. Those days were heaven. I didn't know how short they would be." Ozzy listened in silence. There was no expression on his face, but his eyes said everything. He understood. Maybe he hadn't experienced exactly the same things, but he knew what loss meant. He had lost Randy. He had lost friends. There had been times when he had lost his own way. Marcus continued. "I was 15 when my mum got sick. Breast cancer. She fought for 6 months. My dad and I went to the hospital every day. She would hold my hand and I would sing songs to her. She would smile even in her final days. Music made her happy. I was there when she took her last breath. She closed her eyes and was gone. Quietly, peacefully. But what she left behind was anything but peaceful." Marcus's hands had begun to tremble. He gripped the coffee cup as if trying to warm himself. "My dad fell apart," he said, his voice hoarse. "My mum was everything to him. He didn't know how to live without her. He started drinking. First in the evenings, then at noon, then in the mornings. He lost his job. We had to sell our house. We moved to a small apartment. I dropped out of school and started working. But it wasn't enough. The more my dad drank, the more he changed. He became angry, aggressive, unrecognizable. One night, drunk, he threw me out. 'You're the reason your mother died,' he said. 'If it weren't for you, maybe she'd still be alive.' Those words still ring in my ears." Ozzy's jaw tightened. "Bloody hell," he muttered, almost in a whisper. "Saying that to a 16-year-old kid?" He shook his head. "What your father said isn't true, Marcus. I hope you know that. Cancer isn't anyone's fault. And a father, no matter how much pain he's in, should never blame his child. That man was crushed under his grief, but that doesn't excuse what he did to you." Marcus lowered his head. "I know," he said quietly. "I know that now. But back then, at 16, I believed him. I blamed myself. For months, while wandering the streets, I thought my mother's death was my fault. I had the same nightmares every night. Then one day at a shelter, I talked to a counselor. She told me the truth. I started therapy, though not regularly. Slowly I began to heal, but I couldn't get off the streets. No ID, no address, no job. It's a vicious cycle. You can't find a way out." Ozzy thought for a moment. "So what happened to the guitar?" he asked. "Your father's guitar." Marcus's face twisted with pain. "My dad sold it," he said. "For drinking money. When that guitar was gone, so was our last connection. I haven't held a guitar in 3 years. But every day I play in my head. Every night I fall asleep moving my fingers. Music hasn't left me. I can't leave it. But without an instrument, I'm just living on dreams." Ozzy stood up. Marcus looked at him in surprise. The old man took out his wallet, left some bills on the table, and turned to Marcus. "Come with me," he said. "We've got somewhere to be." Marcus stood up without understanding what was happening and followed Ozzy. They walked out of the coffee shop and down the sidewalk. They were heading toward Guitar Center. Marcus's heart began to race. "What are we doing?" he asked, his voice trembling. Ozzy didn't answer. He just walked. They walked through the doors of Guitar Center. Ozzy pointed to the window display. "I'd like to buy that black Les Paul Custom," he said. The sales associate's eyes widened for a moment, both because of the price and because he recognized the customer. "Of course, sir," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "I'll get it ready right away." Marcus stood frozen. "No," he said, his voice barely audible. "No, you can't do this. It's too expensive. I didn't ask you for anything." Ozzy turned to him and looked into his eyes. "I know you didn't ask," he said calmly. "I'm giving it. There's a difference." Marcus wiped his eyes, but the tears wouldn't stop. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why are you helping me? I'm nothing, a homeless bum." Ozzy was silent for a moment. Then he began to speak. "Because I was once just like you, Marcus. I grew up in the poorest neighborhoods of Birmingham. I dropped out of school, I stole, I went to prison. Everyone thought I was nothing. I thought so too. But then music came. Black Sabbath came. And my life changed." He paused, his eyes drifting far away. "I was lucky. I met the right people at the right time, but I also know that luck alone isn't enough. Someone has to open the door for you. Today, I'm opening that door." The sales associate brought the guitar. The black Gibson Les Paul Custom gleamed under the lights. Marcus's hands trembled as he reached for it. When his fingers touched the strings, 3 years of longing burst out all at once. Ozzy gestured for him to play. "Show me what you can do," he said. Marcus took the guitar in his lap, plugged it into an amplifier, and began playing the opening riff of Crazy Train. Randy Rhoads's iconic riff. His technique was rusty, but the soul was there. The passion was there. Ozzy closed his eyes, and as he listened, Randy's face appeared in his mind. Maybe this wasn't a coincidence. When Marcus finished playing, Ozzy pulled a business card from his pocket. "There's a name on this," he said. "Jack Reynolds. He runs a music school in Los Angeles. I'll call him tomorrow. He can give you a scholarship. And I know a family with a spare room. You can stay there for a few months until you get back on your feet." Marcus looked at the card. "Is this real?" he asked in a whisper. Ozzy nodded. "I have one condition. One day, when you've made it, you'll do the same for someone else. Someone you see on the street who's lost all hope. You'll reach out to them. Promise me." Tears streamed down Marcus's face. "I promise," he said. As they were leaving the store, Ozzy pulled out his phone. "Sharon, it's me. I'm running a bit late. I'm bringing someone for dinner. Set an extra plate." He turned to Marcus. "You're staying with us tonight. There's a New Year's dinner. Your family now." That night, at the Osbourne family's New Year's dinner, there was one extra guest at the table. After dinner, the two of them played together in Ozzy's music room. Paranoid, Iron Man, Crazy Train. When the fireworks exploded at midnight, Marcus looked up at the sky through the window and felt real hope for the first time in 3 years. Ozzy came and stood beside him. "New year, new beginning," he said. "You can't change the past, Marcus, but you can write the future."